Give it up for Celeste.
Hey guys, I'm Celeste. Also, thanks JG for the intro. I'm really excited to be here, and I feel like this is a very full circle moment for me. So thank you for joining me today. So yeah, I'm Celeste, and my story starts when I immigrated to Philadelphia from the Philippines when I was 16 years old. I was just kind of trying to figure out, this new place, and I was feeling just really lost and felt like I didn't belong. My high school years and my college years were exciting and new, but also super confusing and just like really painful. And I was figuring out how to root myself. I just didn't know how to do that. So after college, I kind of dabbled in local politics. I was a political science major. I worked in a bunch of coffee shops. I got into blogging. I kept a photo journal, which is essentially like all the photos that you're going to see today. And I tried out freelance web design for the first time. My intro to that was blogging, and I was blogging about coffee, and so anyway, big coffee nerd here. And so I was figuring out my way, and I think at this time I was like maybe like 5 or 6 years into Philly. I was like still super fresh, but something didn't feel quite right. And so I tried to work up the courage to tell my immigrant parents that I needed to go find myself and not go to law school, which was strange for them, definitely. But yeah, I decided that I was gonna leave Philadelphia and go to San Diego to chase some sunlight and beautiful weather. And so I packed up everything that I owned. I took my 2 pups with me, Hoagie and Scotch. They're not with us anymore, but I felt like they deserved a cameo because they are just amazing. But yeah, I took my babies with me. It took 3 days to get from Philly to San Diego, and I was off to the next adventure, whatever that was. So here I was, I touched down in San Diego. It had been 10 years at this point, and I felt like I was back to square one. And kind of sort of, felt okay about it, but really I felt like I was just like in a new garden, in a new space. I had like a different opportunity to kind of shape who I was as a person. And while I was there, I continued working in coffee. I became a latte art judge, which is like so random, but also very fun. I traveled a lot. I fell in love with nature even more. Saw some of the most beautiful sunsets, learned how to surf, got stung by a stingray, which is also terrible. But yeah, I felt like my life was starting to kind of take shape, and I was happy with where I was. I interned for like a local tech startup, and I got kind of like into UI UX, and I had a lot of questions about what was next for me. I was out there really alone, and things were a little murky. But now in hindsight, I think about it, and those were actually very just dormant years for me. And I still had these ideas that I had planted as small seeds over time, and things were happening underground, even if I didn't know that they were happening underground, and even if I didn't really see it. So fast forward a few years, and I decided to take the leap. And I started freelancing. I went back into web design at the time. And I had a lot of pushback. Especially from my parents. They're like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "I don't know, so we'll figure it out." But I think at the time, when I met Max, my now husband, that kind of like really helped me go for it. I felt ready enough, and if it wasn't going to work out, then I would just go back to working. So I felt like I had nothing to lose. And so yeah, I started dabbling in brand and web design and merch. I started to learn how to dev my own sites and kind of more the back end side of things, and I ended up in product design, which is what I do now, and I really love it. And it's been great. It's funny because I used to think about it like it was going to be a pit stop for my career. You know, like I didn't know what was next, but I was going to at least give myself a solid footing before the next thing came. But funny enough, it never actually became a pit stop. It was the path that I was supposed to take, and 7 years in, like I'm still here and I'm still doing it. And I think learning all the things about product design, I think really was a foreshadowing, I guess, with whatever was about to come in my life, even though I wasn't aware of it yet. And so yeah, I think a few years in, I was starting to feel like this itch for another creative outlet. I was on my computer all the time, I was looking at code all the time, and I was like, I need a break. And I love gardening, if you didn't already know from my photos. But I love nature. And so I took up a hobby, and I took up gardening again. I wanted to go back to basics and do something with my hands and work with soil and something that was like life-giving. And I started Euflora. And it's funny because I love that name then, and I love it now, and I still feel very, very close to that name. It just kind of came to me. But I started Euflora, and at the time, I got started because one of my first website clients when I went back to freelance was, you know, closing up her business, and she said, hey, you know, bring a U-Haul, come over to my house, grab all the plants, grab all the planters, all the soil, take whatever you want. I was like, okay, sure. So I go do that, and I set up a little workshop for me in my apartment balcony. And then over time, I was introduced to another friend, Lindsay, who also had a succulent business in San Diego, and we became fast friends. I didn't have any expectation of it. I was like not really trying to like monetize my hobby. I was just trying to learn from somebody else who was, you know, ahead in years from me, and I was just really trying to be a sponge and absorb what she knew and like try to provide value to her where I could. So I apprenticed under her, learned how to kind of like do the ropes. And again, I was just like, I'm in it for the ride. This is fun for me. So you tell me what to do and I will do it. And then eventually, the opportunity to acquire the business from her came up. And I said, oh man, like, well, I didn't think about this at all, but this would be a great opportunity to kind of see where this goes. Like, I already knew how the accounts worked. I already knew like that side of the business on the financial side, and like all the things that it felt like a good bet to do. So I pitched to my now co-founder, my business partner, Clarice. I wrote her this 12-page business plan, which was probably like not needed. And I said, what do you think? Like, would you go in on this with me? And she said yes. And so that was when Euflora officially went from hobby to business. And with my background in product, I was kind of like thinking about it all on like the back end side of, all right, we're gonna create the user pathways, we're gonna create the selling channels, B2B, D2C, like all like the more technical business side of things. And then together, like we kind of really expanded the product portfolio from succulent arrangements, and then we did wholesale, and then we did these large-scale plant walls, which here's a little clip of me taking care of there's 4 of them, and it's a live succulent wall, but it's very sad because this lives in a client's backyard, and no one's ever gonna see it, but you guys did. And so yeah, you know, I felt like our motto has always been creating art with plants, and that was like the through line with everything that we did, whether that was event design, you know, like wholesale. We did workshops, which is seriously some of my favorite things that I've ever done, because it allows people to create and play with mediums that they don't necessarily know or are familiar with, and it gives them an introduction to it in a space where they could just play. And I love that about workshops. And And then we also kind of got into consumer goods. We have DIY kits and little pressed, botanical flower cards and bookmarks. There's a theme, it's all cute, it's all flowery, it's all planty. And one of the favorite pieces that we've done, and hopefully the next video loads up, but is a pair of these preserved moss walls. They live in an architecture firm, and they're acoustic, which I had never done that before, but I was like, sign me up, I'll figure it out. And now it's someone's really nice Zoom background, I guess you could say. I don't think this video is gonna play, so that's it was just a little behind the scenes of the process of like how we do it. And so yeah, I felt like things were good, like business was blooming, pun intended. And like I was really busy with client work, I was really busy with Euflora, we were expanding, we were doing all these things, we were doing collaborations with Madewell and Anthropology, and it was awesome. But I felt like the weight of it all was starting to really kind of like have a negative effect on me. And then I think at this season of my life as well, I was thinking that I always needed to be like blooming. I needed to be on all the time. But the natural season of things, that's just not how it works, right? Like we always have a good period and then a down period, and those are equally important in order for us to get to whatever's next. And so, yeah, I was going through a really tough time. I was just like overwhelmed. I was grieving a lot in my personal life. And mind you, this was also like late last year, so I'm just freshly out of it now. And I'm happy to be out, thank God. But I was overwhelmed all the time. I was burnt out, I had fear of failure, I had fear of success, oddly enough. I felt like an imposter and like, what the hell am I doing? And also, coincidentally, that was when we were thinking about moving back to Philadelphia. And so I was grieving this whole 10 years in San Diego. I was just like, it's the end of an era. I don't know what's happening next in my life. And I felt like I was back at that like square one feeling that was just like, I really thought that I was like over this whole thing. I felt like we grew out of that. And I was really sad and I was confused. And little did I know, because I had planted all of these little seeds over time, that things were still growing underneath the surface, kind of like how it always did before, a reliable way for us to know when the cycle of things is like coming to an end and beginning again and over and over and over again. And things were still like happening and growing underneath the surface, even though I didn't know it yet, and even though I didn't want it to. They were there. And so I think at the time, I needed this wilting period. And I feel like we all do, right? Like to some degree, we all do. I really needed this wilting period. I needed to come down. I needed to rest. I needed to hibernate and be underground and be in the dark because I was spent. And then, over time, there was a lot of signs that you should do this again. I'm like, no, I don't want to. But, as we all know, life is going to happen, and you're either on it or you're not. And so this brings me to renewal, which was coming home to Philly. It was February 10, 2025. It was the day after the Super Bowl win. It was huge. We closed on our house. Go Birds. Go Birds. And it gives me goosebumps to think about it even now, because that was when I was like, whatever this thing is, like moving to Philly, like it's coming. So you either gonna buckle up or you're gonna get swept away in the tide, and we don't want that. And I was resisting of it. I was resisting it a lot. Like, this was in February, we moved in April. I was mental breakdown lady every single day because I just was like, what is happening in my life? I feel like I don't even know myself anymore, all the things. But, you know, we touched down in Philly and it felt like home because it is home, you know? I felt like this is why I feel like this is a full circle moment, because you know, decades have passed, and now I'm back to like the soil that nurtured me the first time. And I felt, you know, that I could do it again. I could do it again. I stopped waiting for permission, and something clicked. It's like, you could do it again, you did it before, and now, you know, you could do it not just for yourself, but for other immigrant people of color out there trying to find their way, you know, in this country. You could do it for creative people who maybe dabble like in a different medium, or you know, do it professionally, but maybe they're trying to find their own way, their own path. And you could do it for everybody I could do it for everyone who was in my place when I was looking for someone like me to look up to. And it was a really beautiful thing. And I feel like if you asked me this 6 months ago, I would not have this mental, I would not be in this mental space. And so I think it's important to remember that like things take time, you know? It's like, I think we find, or like we listen to these talks and it feels like such a highlight reel, but really these are like decades in the making. But the seeds were always there, and I want to kind of come back to that. So I would like to invite you all to have the courage to be seen and to bloom where you're planted. Because even when the soil is dry and the season is off, your time is going to come. And when it does, you're not just going to bloom for yourself, you're going to bloom for all of us. Thank you.